everyone, my name is Josh and this film's called Interesting Musings, and today I'm going to be talking to you about a film which I have been wanting to do a review on or a video on for a while, and that is the 2004 horror comedy film co-written by Simon Pegg and Edgar Wright and directed by Edgar Wright, Shaun of the Dead. Now, this film is an interesting story. The film basically focuses around a 28-year-old man named Shaun. He has a pretty interesting life. He pretty much goes to a job that he doesn't like. He has a girlfriend whom he loves. He has a mum who he loves. He has a best friend who he cares about. And he has a couple of friends who are friends of his girlfriends who he doesn't really like, but he basically puts up with them. But he has a very good thing going on. He's been with Liz, his girlfriend, for 3 years. And it just seems like his relationship isn't going anywhere. Like, she essentially is wanting to get out there and do more interesting stuff. What the basic routine of their entire day is, they go out and do something. He goes to work. He goes home to his flat with his friend Ed. They have a bunch of fun. They play records or vinyl discs, and they play video games, but then they also go out to the pub, and of course does Liz and her friends want to come along. But Liz doesn't want to do that anymore. She wants to get out there and do more interesting things. She wants to live a little, and she wants Shaun to want to do it too. And Shaun promises that he will, do those things. He'll go to the place that does. They'll go to the place that does all the fish. They'll have a proper date night. They'll go out for a proper meal. And of course, things will change. And this is where the story of Shaun of the Dead takes place, because even though he does say he's going to do all these things, within a single day, he ends up not doing any of those things. He ends up getting so, bored of work that he ends up, forgetting to show customers a certain TV. He works at a retail shop. And of course, when he's getting his mother flowers for his bi-monthly visit to go and visit his mum, he ends up running into his stepfather named Philip, who is his stepdad, just to be clear, and he kind of forgets a lot of stuff. He forgets to, book the restaurant for, he forgets to book the restaurant for Liz and his date, which is called Fulci's, and he ends up, not be able to book it. He ends up not being able to get a table for 8, so he ends up, forgetting that, and he says, oh, well, what are we going to do now? And they just say, well, let's just do the Winchester. And Ed, his flatmate, who is a bit of a slob, he likes to spend most of his day in the flat, not really doing very much except playing video games and occasionally watching television or smoking weed. And he literally is the worst flatmate ever, but he's a really good friend. He's a really good friend to Shaun. He's been there for him during some of the tough times, some of the more difficult times, and he's known him since primary school, and he likes having him around. He's a laugh. But his other flatmate, Pete, doesn't really want him to be there. He wants him to be, out. He wants him to go home. He doesn't want to be there. He feels like he's a student again, being in there. And he feels like he doesn't bring any real money into the house. So he's not really contributing to any of the rent or anything like that. So he's just kind of sort of existing and floating through life, pretty much in the same vein that Shaun does. And what I really like about this film is it really is a really good example of a really weird idea, really executed brilliantly to every single possible conclusion that you can think of. Like, the essential conflict of the film is it's a change your life, turn your life around kind of story. And there's a little bit of romance in there. There's a little bit of friendship. There's a little bit of, angst with a romantic rival who's a little bit of an arsehole, but he's also kind of, charming in his own way as well. And if you really think about it, this film is essentially a Richard Curtis film. The same guy who brought us films like Love Actually, Notting Hill, and Four Weddings and a Funeral. But if you add zombies into the mix, it turns it into something completely different. And that's where I want to really kind of talk about this film proper with all the great stuff that this film does. Because what's really interesting is that this film was a labour of love from both Simon Pegg and Nick Frost. This first originally came to them in the form of an episode of Spaced, which was their comedy series that they produced for Channel 4, I think it was, or E4. And they got very successful, and they did an episode on Resident Evil where the main character is basically... It essentially focuses on geek culture in the UK. Like, there's this one character who owns a comic book shop. There's this one very famous scene where Simon Pegg's character has an entire rant about Star Wars, the prequel series, and about George Lucas. It's a really great. It's essentially the British version of the Big Bang Theory. If the Big Bang Theory was well written, that's kind of what Spaced is essentially. And this film is fantastic. This film sort of became a spin-off of that almost, and an entire trilogy of films. But this film basically focuses on the idea of what happens when you're forced to turn your life around, when you're not doing that very kind of crucial thing of taking that first step. Something has to come in, someone has to step in, fate, God, or some sort of higher power, some sort of divine intervention needs to step in and say to you, look, we're going to create something where you're forced to buck your ideas up and just basically go full throttle into an action role. Literally in this case, because Shaun literally has to become the de facto leader of this group of survivors. So yeah, it all starts off very simple. He has a pretty shit evening where he ends up, breaking up with Liz while he's going to her flat to try to explain the situation with the Winchester and the table that he forgot to book at Fulci's, which is of course a reference to an Italian filmmaker who directed films like Lucio Fulci's Zombie Flesh Eaters. That's what it's called over here in the UK. It's referred to in America as Lucio Fulci's Zombie, and various other films of that nature. But he also directed the Gates of Hell trilogy, which had House by the Cemetery, The Beyond, and various other films of that nature. But he's another director who, is very much, reference. But there's a lot of, references to that. But he has a bit of a shit day. He breaks up with his girlfriend Liz while he's in her flat. He decides to go to the Winchester because that's the only place he knows to sort of drown his sorrows. But he ends up getting reminded of her in every possible way. But what's really great is that this particular very shit evening that Shaun has pretty much, creates a zombie apocalypse. He goes to his local corner shop, and there's this really wonderful scene where it's one continuous shot where he's just basically walking from his address, from his flat to the corner shop. And while that's happening, it's funny that he basically hasn't fully woken up yet. But while he's having all this stuff happen, you're seeing all these very disturbing things. That you're hearing car alarms go off. You hear shattered glass. You hear, you see zombies walking around, or, the undead walking around. And you even see a dead body in one of the doorsteps of one of the houses at one point. So there's a lot of very disturbing stuff going on. But it really is funny because you're also comparing that to how very nonchalant and how very almost zombie-like Shaun is himself when he's getting the items that he needs to get from the corner shop so that he can go back to the house and just lounge around because he's still drowning in the sorrows of the night before. But what really makes this film so incredible is it's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful example of how you use a lot of gags, because there's a lot of gags that happen very early on in the film. It is very funny. There's a lot of gags in the film that get set up in the very beginning, but then they get paid off somewhere down the line in some way, shape, or form. Let's say, for example, what seems to be a very, harmless gag about, where are we going to do? Where are we going to go? And it goes, the Winchester. And he goes, don't be stupid. They don't do food. And he goes, oh, there's a Breville out back. Joan will do your toasty. And things like that. And Shaun goes, Ed, this is serious. And in a way, it is actually kind of interesting because what turns out to be a very kind of poor excuse for food, like a very small bit of food that you won't really kind of see as a dinner, it's more like a snack or some sort of a lunch that you have. It becomes a very crucial component later on because when they're at the Winchester, when the zombie apocalypse is happening, David basically has a bit of a meltdown. He says, well, what about food? What are we going to eat? And his girlfriend Di says toasties, and Ed goes, oh, there's a Breville out back. So there's a lot of stuff like that does get recontextualized. There's the pre-apocalypse madness. There's a pre-apocalypse, the pre-apocalypse line, which is the oh, there's a Breville out back, Joan will do your toasty, and they say Ed, this is serious. But then you get the apocalypse version of the scene, which is that it's become now a very crucial means of survival, in which they need food, they need to eat. So of course, toasties become very crucial to their survival. And it's pretty much the same way with the character of Yvonne. Whenever Shaun encounters the character of Yvonne, she always asks the words, "How are you doing?" And he says the words, "surviving." And it's something that she always manages to say at certain points in the film. And there's almost like a rule of three element to it, where she does it once. He's sort of, coming home from work. He's very down. He's very depressed. He's got the flowers. He's very stressful. He's very much just going about his day. And it's when he, is talking to Yvonne and he goes, "Oh, are you doing anything special for your 3-year anniversary?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, we're going out for a meal tonight, actually." And she goes, "Oh, anywhere nice?" And he just goes, "Yeah," as if to think, yeah, I was meant to, where did that come from? Like, I completely forgot about that kind of thing. And I really do love that. I love how stuff like that really does kind of almost feed into the humour. And the humour is very character-based. Like, there's this really wonderful gag between Ed and Shaun where after Pete basically tells him to clean up a little bit and take all the answering machine messages, not just your own, and Pete actually acts very condescending to him, who's the second flatmate that Shaun and Ed lives with. He goes, well, he basically just talks down to him and makes him feel like he's this big. And then he turns around and he basically has written on him in post-it notes, separate post-it notes, "I am a prick." And then Ed just basically goes, well, it was pretty funny if you really think about it. And he goes, "I'm sorry, Shaun." And then Shaun goes, "No, it's all right, it's fine." And he goes, "No, I'm sorry, Shaun." And he starts to laugh, and then Shaun does his face like, "Ah." And it's that wonderful thing. And he goes, "Oh my God, that's gross." And he goes, "I'll stop doing it when you stop laughing." And he goes, "I'm not laughing." And it's really weird because that scene is key to their relationship. It really shows you what kind of a friendship they have. And it's such a weird joke because it is essentially a fart joke. It's a joke about flatulence. But what's very interesting is they manage to make it such a core element of their friendship, because when it gets to the end of the film, and spoiler by the way for the film, when it gets to the end of the film and Shaun has to make a very big decision, a very grown-up decision, which is to either go with his girlfriend out to freedom or to stay with his best friend, he chooses. He says he could get them both out, but Ed decides to just stay there because he's been very severely injured. He's been bitten 3 times potentially, and he isn't feeling too good. Like, he's bleeding from the neck, he's bleeding from his arm, and he just about has enough strength to hold the Winchester rifle to defend himself against the zombies when they eventually come through the cellar door. So he basically just decides, I'm going to go out with Liz and just, be okay, be safe. And he's not going to make it, but you do kind of get this impression that, you hope that he does somehow. But it's really sad because there's that moment where he has the, "I'm sorry, Shaun" moment. And he goes, "Yeah, I'm sorry the way I shouted at you earlier." But then he goes, "Oh no, I'm sorry, Shaun." And he goes, "No, it's okay, you don't have to apologise." And he goes, No, I'm sorry, Shaun." And then he does that gag in that face like, and then he says, "Oh my God, that's gross." And then he goes, "I'll stop doing it when you stop laughing." Literally, he's literally clinging to consciousness as he's saying it, and he just goes, "I'm not laughing." And I really love that moment where they just do the head thing, where they press each other's heads together. I really love that moment. It makes me cry. It's such a good moment because it really does show you how strong their relationship is. And to me, it's a love story. It's a love story, but it's not a love story in the obvious way. Yes, the romance in the story is Shaun and Liz, but what's very interesting is the love story is between Ed and Shaun. That's the whole entire that's the secret love story that kind of always encompasses, every installment of the Cornetto trilogy. It's a love story between friends, and it's actually kind of beautiful. It really is a wonderful love story between friends, and it's such a great, wonderful send up of that idea of, you can have fun, you can enjoy your geek culture stuff, you can enjoy your comic books, your novels, your video games, your internet videos, but eventually there comes a time where you just have to kind of, learn to not necessarily throw that stuff away, but you do have to kind of learn to, say, well, yeah, this is the time to, focus on getting out there and finding someone else to spend the rest of your life with, because you're not going to be able to be friends forever, and that's the tragic reality of life. Is even though it's nice to stay with your friends, it's nice to stay with people who are familiar. Sometimes it's nice to go out and meet people, and sometimes go and live the life that you want to live. And of course, Liz for sure represents that, and it's just such a fantastic film. And like I said, this film is such a great labour of love. There's this wonderful sequence where where Shaun's calling his mum, and she says that Philip's been bitten, and she and Shaun goes, "Oh, is Philip? Have you been bitten?" She goes, "No, but Philip has." And he goes, "Oh, okay." And then they're saying, "Oh, don't worry, we're going to come to get you. You'll be safe. Don't worry, just sit tight." And then she goes, "Oh, I don't want to cause a fuss." And then Ed just shouts down the phone, "We're coming to get you, Barbara." And oh yeah, sorry about that. I just got a hair on my lip, my tongue. Yeah, but yeah, I really do love this film in all its different respects. I really do think it's a really fun movie. It has a lot of great jokes. It's got a lot of great characters. I love the writing. I love the actual transitions. I love how literally when characters would be transitioning out of one scene, they'll have a prop, like say for example, we'll put the phone down and it would transition to a shot of the outside where someone's running away from a zombie or something, and then it would cut to Shaun, paying for flowers, or it would have a Shaun pulling a dart out of his head after it's been, plonked into his head after, a particularly, memorable confrontation with the barman during a montage of Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. So there's a lot of great moments like that where he basically pulls the dart out of his head and he goes, "Yeah, Big Al was right, but dogs can look up." And it transitions to the scene where they're loading up the Winchester and they're, trying to defend off the zombies. But it's a really fantastic film. I love the characters. I think my favourite character besides Shaun is obviously Ed, but I do like the character of Diane, or Di, because she is a very funny character. She's an aspiring actress. According to Shaun, she's a failed actress. But yeah, she's a really good actress because it's really weird, but every character in some way has something to do during this apocalypse. Like, say, for example, during the zombie apocalypse, both Diane and the only person who really doesn't do a thing is David. He kind of tries to switch the lights on, but that doesn't do any favours. Ed has the Molotov cocktail moment, but he has several other moments where he's actually kind of, he's a bit, useless throughout most of it, but he does have the Molotov cocktail moment, but even that backfires. But every single character has something to do throughout the apocalypse. Ed is the one who drives the car. Di and David has to, sit together, close together. Like Di has to sit on David's lap, and the mum has to just basically stay there and just try to relax and be calm. Whereas Liz is the more forward thinker. She's the one who actually tries to remind people, like, look, this is what we've got to do. This is how we go and do this stuff. Like, do you want to get the blunt objects or whatever? And it's such a great setup. I really like the fact that Di takes that moment where she is that failed actress. She is that actress. She's basically an acting coach, essentially, where they have to pretend to be zombies so that they can get past this crowd of people. It's such a fantastic set piece. It's totally bonkers, but what really makes this sequence work is that it does manage to bring the comedy in, but it also manages to bring in the horror, because they are really close and personal to the zombie horde at this moment, and they could very easily be found out, and they could very easily be torn to pieces, but what's really good is that they really commit to the idea of, oh, we're now going to be zombies now, and we have to pretend to be these creatures so that we can get to the Winchester. And it's a fantastic movie. I really do love this film. I think it's a fantastic piece of work. I really do think it's a wonderful piece of British cinema, and it's literally a film where no matter who I talk to, whether it's my friends, my family, or even just random acquaintances that I've just been talking to on the fly through my work or things like that, I'll often be talking about movies, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I love Shaun of the Dead, it's fantastic," and things like that. And I just think that's amazing. Like, that's absolutely amazing that nearly everybody who I've spoken to about it has always said that it's an amazing film. And I think that's an incredible thing that this film has been able to do. It's been able to just give us a little bit of quintessential Britishness, but it manages to do it in such a very fun, yet very gory and very, graphic way. And I really do like it because it is essentially a Richard Curtis movie, but just with blood. And that's what I like to think of it as. And it's a brilliant movie. I would highly recommend it. And what I really like, before I wrap up this review, the actual use of pubs is a constant motif throughout most of the Cornetto trilogy. And I really do like the fact that that's the case, because there's a set piece in Shaun of the Dead. In Shaun of the Dead, it's a massive, set piece in the entire film. In Hot Fuzz, there's this wonderful sequence. There's two very memorable sequences in a pub. And in The World's End, the entire story, like Shaun of the Dead, is set around pubs. And I really do like that aspect. And it really does sort of tie into the theme. Because a lot of the time, when you're a working class British person, whether you're a working class person in your 20s or whether you're a working class person in your 80s, everybody goes to the pub. The pub is such a very quintessential social gathering place that it kind of feels very weird to kind of see it being depicted in that way. But it does really give you that sense of homeliness, being at home, being among friends, being somewhere familiar where you know all the exits are, and you're allowed to smoke if you want to. Well, of course you're not allowed to smoke indoors anymore, but as of when this film was released, that was actually a rule. You could actually smoke indoors. But yeah, it's a really fantastic film. And I just think it's one of my favourite Edgar Wright films. It's one of my favourite films in the Cornetto trilogy. It definitely is my favourite. I don't care what anyone else says. But let me know what you guys think of this film in the comments. Did you like this film? Do you think that there are areas where it could improve? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. And this has been Josh with Whimsical Industry Musings. I hope you're doing very well. Take care. Bye-bye for now.